This is General Lavine, eccentric, a prelude from Book II, about the American clown, Ed Lavine, who did a tour, actually, starting in August 1st, 1910, of the Marigny Theatre on the Avenue Champs Elysees in Paris. Debussy became fascinated with his outsized movements, his somewhat marionette puppet-like jerkiness, his bizarre costume that made him look like a military clown. He had the clown makeup, but he had apparently a giant thermometer here, and he had a gun that was a water hose, and he had a hot water bottle that was his backpack, and of course he wore the outsized clothes, and he was this real satire. And apparently the impresario at the theater actually wanted to commission various French composers to write music for a tour that Lavine was going to do, but he actually was under contract until 1912, so it wasn't even possible for him to do this. But Debussy went repeatedly. He was fascinated. The Marigny Theatre was really sort of English-based. They had more English productions, and at this time, Debussy, as well as the Parisians, were fascinated with things, English, whether it was Peter Pan in Kensington Gardens, which he used for some of his other preludes and read to his daughter, or whether it was other English elements, cultural things as well. He liked to read Dickens. So it's an interesting history. There's some other interesting things. Rimsky-Korsakov, Sadko, the piece, Ed Lavine actually set some of his act to this piece. This is curious because the Russians and the French had this connection, and Debussy was very influenced by Russian music in this period. And so it's quite interesting. This would have also made Ed Lavine more attractive to him, because in Rimsky-Korsakov he deals with what's known as the dominant ninth chord. Now a dominant seventh would be C, E, G, B flat. If we make it a ninth, we'd add a D on top. And that chord allows for various identities, more dissonant, less dissonant, half diminished, And so I think that's interesting that there's this Rimsky-Korsakov connection as well. And then Ed Lavine has another personal connection with me, which is kind of bizarre. When he was in London, he came across Ethel Liggins, and he encouraged her and actually helped facilitate her move to Los Angeles. She was born in, I think, 1886. And so she ended up in LA. Well, she was Daniel Pollock's first piano teacher, and Daniel Pollock was one of my important teachers. And she changed her name to Ethel Legинska because, of course, anything Russian would get you a lot farther if you were a musician. So it's kind of interesting that Ed Lavine brought her over, and that she was my important teacher's first teacher. It's funny how small the world can be. It's not so much have to do with Debussy, but Lavine actually, he ended up in Long Island selling some things, and then he settled in Los Angeles, and had a quiet career, and kind of went into the obscurity that he originally had come from. There's a good Catherine Kautsky has a pretty good book, Debussy in Paris, and there's also a website, and it actually has a very extensive discussion of Lavine. And if you want to learn more, it's quite interesting. It talks about these influences and speculates about Debussy, and it also. Let's see, this was from Le Figaro, a review of the program, that one of the programs Debussy probably saw, because it was August 3rd, and then the 9th, 11th, and the 13th. Le Figaro said, where the devil does, the redoubtable General Lavine got all his ideas. He is the hit of the show at the Marigny. The crowd turns out for him, and everything in his act is genuinely funny, including the animated scenery which, from time to time, brings new characters onto the stage, like the fisherman with his line, whom Lavine, the pitiless general, forces to take a bath. There is nothing, down to the offstage noises, which does not serve to underline the comedy of this fantastic personage, juggling with his hat and his cigar, but such effects cannot be talked about, they must be seen. Quick, an aeroplane, let's go to the Marigny. So there was a lot of excitement surrounding him. So it starts with kind of a, mechanical introduction, right? Kind of awkward. And then the official cakewalk starts. And it's interesting, now that's not a dominant ninth, that's not a dominant seventh, but it's interesting how it's this cluster of C, D, and A, which is some sort of a seventh, but it gives us this sound, it gives us this dissonance, and it's interesting. This is something that on his Blüthner, these grace notes were very, very easy and effective, to play. Then you have this passage where it sounds like Lavine is kind of tumbling, this chromatic. And then kind of the joke. And then he goes on to the next antic, It's a fun piece to play. I've played it for a long time. Well, this... We can imagine various visual comedy going on while this is happening, right? That sounds like shortening bread a little bit. It's like a statement from that. Very Wagnerian, we have this, it's actually a B major, but it's enharmonically spelled C flat major. And then, A flat major. So third related, keys that are third away. So he's working, Debussy was very influenced by Wagner, so he's working on a number of levels with this. So anyway, there's more I could say about this, but I guess I won't, because the whole history of the cakewalk is a complicated one, but in this case, it's a very positive one, and it's an interesting look into a particular time in 1910 at the Marigny Theatre on the Avenue Champs Elysees.